I would like to highlight the 5 teams throughout the NFL, 5 out of the 32, where I believe the movement on their season win total from pre-flop to adjusted after week 1 raises an eyebrow. So let's go division by division. If one of those 5 pops up, I'll mention it. Let us begin with the National Football Conference, the NFC, and we'll start with the NFC East, where there is one team where the season win total adjusted in a way that is curious, and that is the Washington Taco Holders at the top there. You see that beautiful logo, Holding Tacos, at the restaurant right there?
It's crazy. Fish tacos.
So Washington went from 9.5 to essentially 10.5, though the under is juiced. So the under is juiced to a degree. So it's really not that big of an adjustment, but it is somewhat for a team that beat a team they were supposed to beat in the Giants.
I'll do the Fezzik Dinzik. It's a 9.75 to a 10.25.
That's right.
Okay,
that's right. So it's not the most dramatic one, but it is something to note. As far as the others, Philly remains at 10.5, but the over is slightly more juice than it was last week. Dallas and the Giants, they both remain at the numbers they were pre-flop. Dallas was 7.5. They remain at 7.5. The juice does move a little bit to the under after the loss. And the Giants, who I have the season win total under on, they remain at 5.5. That was a game they were supposed to lose, and they in fact lost.
So fascinating. I do love after like week 1 or early season seeing what moves, what doesn't. Okay, So like Washington moves, Giants don't. They played each other. One lost. One was a heavy favorite. Why should anything move, right? So hey, it's a good call out by you. Who brought up Jackson Dart earlier? Will brought up Jackson Dart. That number hadn't moved at all, by the way. 1 week in, that number has not moved. It was 22-1 preseason. It's 22-1 right now.
The Giants thing is so fascinating because you have a brass, right? The GM and the coach, who are one foot's out the door and the other's on a banana peel.
Fighting for the jobs.
They're fighting for their jobs. And so the thinking going into the season was, right, to preserve their jobs. Well, if we just play the vet, right, if we just play Russell Wilson, this will be a better way to preserve our jobs. I'm thinking after 1 week, they're already like, maybe this isn't the best way to keep our jobs. So,
it was that safety net too, right? It's the vet to try to win you a few games, and then you bring in the rook for the excitement, and it's like, well, these guys drafted him, we got to stay with him.
But that's
give him a couple years.
But that's what I mean. I think Russell Wilson probably has 1 week left. If it doesn't go well, he's out, and they'll change course.
I don't know. I think it's also okay. This is where remove me from this argument. Me being the Jameis guy.
All right.
It just matters if Dart's ready to go, right?
Yeah.
And that is, I think everybody's reacting a lot to how bad Russ looked, and I understand that. But if they don't think Dart's fully ready to go, too, you do have another quarterback on that roster you could throw in there for a week or two.
try to force Jameis into this mix. NFC South, Tampa Bay's at 10.5, Carolina's 6.5, New Orleans 4.5, Atlanta 7.5. I believe all remain the same after week 1. If I'm not mistaken, Tampa Bay did go from 9.5 to 10.5, but it's really, like with Washington, it's just a juice correction. Right. So the over 9.5 juiced becomes now the under 10.5 juiced. But that was a closely lined game with Atlanta. So and Atlanta remains at 7.5. Carolina remains at 6.5. New Orleans remains at 4.5.
So like Carolina, I'd bet the under on that. Basically, the juice just flipped, right? So I was getting plus 120 on the under before that loss week 1. Now it's plus 115 to the over. That Atlanta number is kind of interesting to me. I don't think I was as high on that team as like some people we heard in the summer, but it's one game against the Tampa Bay Bucks. 7.5. I don't hate the idea of jumping in on an over on that.
Plus, they outgained them. I mean, in the box score, they outgained them. NFC North, this is where the most dramatic shift happened. And it happened with Green Bay and Detroit. So, Detroit, before the game last week, they had a season win total of 10.5. Do you know what it is now? 8.5, juiced to the over at minus 140. Wow. With Green Bay, their season win total was 9.5. Now it's at 11.5, juiced to the under. So the most dramatic, and by the way, Green Bay was the favorite in that game. So they were, quote unquote, supposed to win it. That's the most curious move among any teams after 1 week of football. The adjustment on Green Bay and the adjustment on Detroit, because there's a little bit of subjectivity involved in that, where it's like, oh, Green Bay's really good, Detroit's not really as good as we thought they were. So that's the biggest adjustment of any teams in the National Football League after 1 week. Minnesota.
That is Broncos-ish from a couple years ago.
Ish, right. The Broncos was the most dramatic ever, which was a 3-game move in a game they were supposed to win. Minnesota goes from 8.5 to 9.5, but that's because, they won a closely lined game. The over was juiced at 8.5 anyway, so it's not much of a move. Same thing with Chicago. Chicago remains where they were, or I should say they go low from 8.5 to 7.5, but, that's an appropriate move, I think, after what we saw. The Green Bay-Detroit thing is the most dramatic.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, an 8.5 still feels kind of low to me on Detroit. It's 1 week.
It's 1 week. NFC West, kind of where it ought to be. San Francisco, they beat Seattle. 10.5 remains 10.5. Seattle loses. 7.5 remain. Oh, excuse me. They were 8.5 juice to the under, but 7.5 is juice to the over. Arizona, before game 1, the Cardinals were at 8.5. They're now at 9.5. But it's sort of like
underjuiced.
The over was juiced at 8.5. The under is now juiced at 9.5. So it's just an incremental move. And with the Rams, that's also kind of where it ought to be too. They go from 9.5 to 10.5 in a game, and that's appropriate because they won a game that they were the underdog in. So it's still an over juice to an under 10.5 juiced, right? Over 9.5 juiced to an under 10.5 juiced, but that's appropriate with the win. I still keep coming back to Green Bay and Detroit. That's the curious one from the NFC.
Yeah, agreed. And this, I think the NFC West as a whole, we've said this all summer long, is going to be one of the more fascinating divisions to watch. But man, this San Francisco team that I don't, neither one of us made any bets on, but we talked about how easy this schedule is going to be all summer long.
Cannot stay healthy.
But you knew the roster did get thinner over this past summer. Now you get guys that are injured already. Oh boy, trouble can build up quick with that team.
Let's go to the AFC, and just to give you a sense of what are the more curious moves or non-moves. Let's go to the AFC East specifically. And I want to seize on, Kelly, on the New England Patriots, because the New England Patriots lost a game they were favored in, right, against the Raiders. Well, they've gone from 8.5 to 8.5. The under just is a little more juiced. So if you're willing to drop the minus 155, which like the Steve Fezzik's of the world would have no compunction whatsoever doing, that didn't move even with a game you weren't supposed to lose.
Yeah, that's interesting.
The juice did, but nothing else.
I mean, I'd be leaning that way anyways. But I think this goes back to, we got the tweet about kind of the exacta results for the AFC East too, where it's just, you shouldn't focus too much on the rest of the division when you're looking at a win total bet, right? But I don't, how much did you learn about this division besides the Bills are really good? I mean, the Dolphins could be trash. Could be. I don't think the Jets are going to be fantastic.
The Bills went from 11.5 to 12.5 because they should have, right, in that closely lined game with the Ravens. The Jets are the team of all of these teams where not only did the win total not change, nor did the juice. They're exactly what they were.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating.
And then the Miami Dolphins went from 7.5 to 6.5, and boy, should they have.
Tell us how you feel about the New York Jets odds makers.
Yeah.
Nice win. We're not moving you at all.
Yeah, we have no idea what you are. You're probably what we thought you were.
Yeah, Dolphins. Look, I think for the guy who tried to give Dolphins fans out there a little bit of hope this offseason, oh boy, did that not look good week 1. This could all unravel real quick.
It could unravel real quick in a couple ways. We always seize on the Mike McDaniel. Yeah, right? Mike. We always seize on the Mike McDaniel could be the first coach fired, and I've said many times, when you're nerdy-ish with capri pants, the NFL establishment will turn on you quicker, right? Because you don't fit the central casting mode of what a football coach ought to be. So when things are going well, it's great. But when things go bad, they're like, you little nerd with your pencil stick, right? All that stuff. You know what the other thing is? The Tua angle on this is pretty fascinating, which I don't think we have brought up. Charles Robinson did a great piece on this at Yahoo. I want to give him a shout on this. The Tua thing could, if the Dolphins thing gets worse, and by the way, New England is a great barometer this week, because if they look bad against New England, oh boy. Tua's contract is such that this could be a Russell Wilson Denver situation. So what I mean by that is, let's say the Dolphins truly suck at football. And let's say the Dolphins brass is like, oh my God, like this is not going how we thought it was. Not only are we going to fire the coach, but we got to do something with Tua. Because do you hear what Xavier Howard said after the game?
No.
Xavier Howard, who plays for the Colts now, but used to play for the Dolphins. After the game, he said, we knew the guy, talking about Tua, we knew the guy, he gets the ball out pretty quick. And once we take away his first read, I feel like it's panic mode after that. And it showed Sunday. We took away his first read, and he was trying to get rid of the ball real quick. So that's the whole game plan against Tua was just focus on his first read, and then he's lost. Here's the story with his salary. Here's the story with what the Broncos ended up doing with Russell Wilson. Remember, Sean Payton got there, and it was like, oh, no, Russell Wilson is not my quarterback. They figured that the next draft, the one with Jaden and with Bo Nix, right, and with Caleb, they figured it was chock full of quarterbacks, and he liked Bo Nix, I guess, that he got his man right at 12. So the Dolphins, and by the way, it was an $85 million cap hit over 2 years for the Broncos, the highest over 2 years in the history of the NFL. This wouldn't be quite as high for the Dolphins. Instead of $85 million over 2 years, you know what it would be? 79.2 million over 2 years. It would count as 62.4 next year and then 16.8 the following year.
Yeah, I'm looking at his contract right now. So it's 4 years left, but you're right, after next season, there's a potential out, it says.
Right, but the point is if you figure you stink now and you have identified a player, Arch Manning anybody, or somebody else in next year's draft. And next year's draft is supposed to be pretty chock full of quarterbacks. Then you might play it the same way the Broncos did, which is pretty kamikaze, but the Broncos proved you could do it. AFC South. I want to seize on Jacksonville here. That's pretty interesting on the Jaguars or the Jaguars, however you prefer. Jaguars, who crushed the Panthers, a team they were supposed to beat, go from 7.5 to 8.5. Why? You beat a team you're supposed to beat. Why did you go to 8.5?
Yeah, good question.
That's the one that I'm like, is that an underplay now on the Jaguars? They beat a team they're supposed to beat. Especially
when, if I'm going back to the division angle a little bit, especially when the rest of the division, okay, I mean, Houston didn't look amazing, but whatever. They played a good team. I mean, Indy couldn't have looked much better, right? And kind of like you said earlier, Tennessee was in that game, but I'm not going to put that on Cam Ward, and Tennessee is a terrible loss.
Indy goes up a game. Oh, no, excuse me. Indy remains the same, except the juice changes, right? Goes from under-juiced at 7.5 to over-juiced at 7.5, now at minus 140 with their win over the Dolphins. Houston, like the Rams went up, Houston went down from 9.5 to 8.5 with the loss against the Rams, a game they were favored in. And then Tennessee, the aforementioned Titans, they remain at 5.5 with the juice just kind of evening out now. To the AFC North. AFC North kind of where it ought to be, right? Mm-hmm. Baltimore went from 11.5 to 11.5. Just the juice changed from the over to the under. Tightly lined game against the Bills. Cincinnati remains at 9.5. Yes, they remain at 9.5. That barely moved, juice-wise even. Cleveland remains at 4.5, though the over is now spectacularly juiced, right, at minus 155. That didn't happen. But it actually, now to be honest with you, it's right around where it was. Didn't really move that much. And then Pittsburgh, 8.5. They were 8.5 before the season. The over is now more juiced after their win over the Jets. And then in the AFC West, the Chargers go from 9.5 to 10.5 after their win against the Chiefs. The Chiefs go from 11.5 to 10.5 after their loss to the Chargers. The Raiders go from 6.5 to 7.5. They won a game they were underdogs in against the Patriots. And then the Broncos, the last one here, they don't change. They remain at 9.5 because they beat a team they were supposed to beat, even though the juice changes barely. Actually, it's almost the exact same. If the Jets were the one that didn't move at all, the Broncos were the closest to that. So, to me, again, the interesting ones are Detroit and Green Bay in the NFC, New England and Jacksonville. Those are curious moves and non-moves.
Yeah.
Moves in the case of Detroit and Green Bay, meaning way too dramatically, in my opinion, based on one game. And with the Patriots and the Jaguars, well, the Patriots, curious that it didn't move after a loss in a game that they were favored in. And with the Jaguars, why did it go up in a game after a game that they were supposed to win? Those are the four after week one where it's always curious to sort of analyze these adjusted markets, and you have to sort of say to yourself as a bettor, where might they have missed the boat. And those are the 4 teams I would have seized.
There's a couple. I'll probably do a couple of these tomorrow. But while we got this graphic up, like division odds have gotten interesting after 1 week too. Like this, there's a lot of divisions I think that are up there for grabs that I don't have strong conviction on. But man, after 1 week, Chargers plus 190, Chiefs plus 190, Broncos plus 230. I don't know if are we sure, Gill, this should be this bunched, that the Broncos should be third in this?
Maybe
I got questions about the Chargers still being us talking about them being the best team in this division.
Thanks for watching, but don't let the betting insights end here. If you want an extra edge this football season, you can get a month of VSiN Pro right now absolutely free. That means access to our betting insights, analysis, and tools like our betting splits at 0 cost to you. Click the link in the description to sign up.